The Mediterranean diet has been extremely popular in food culture over the last few decades, which makes total sense to me. You've got freshness of ingredients, a variety of options, and there's so many different ways to build out a meal. So obviously I'm not in my kitchen today. We've got a renovation in full effect, but that does not stop me from meal prepping for the week. So today I'm gonna be showing you how to make some of my favorite Mediterranean inspired items that I'm gonna be turning into delicious meals throughout the entire week. So we're gonna start things off with a beautiful roasted beet dip that is just packed with flavor, and it's gonna be an incredible spread for all of your meals throughout the week. So I've got one beet that's much bigger than the other two, and you want them to roast at the same timing. So I'm gonna slice that in half, and I'm actually gonna reserve half of it for another recipe coming up. But first I'll just add a little bit of olive oil, hit them with some salt, and wrap them up. And I'm using 2 sheets of tin foil to protect them a little more because these are going on the fire. While I'm roasting the beets, I figured this is a good time to roast some garlic as well. Slice that garlic right in half. I'll make a classic tin foil pouch, add a little bit of salt and oil, and just some water to steam it a little bit and protect it from the fire. So we're prepped for our roasting. Now obviously you could do this in an oven, pop it on 400 degrees, but we've got the fire ripping and it's putting off some coals down there, which is great. So what we're gonna do is just fold these down the aisle. All right, I'll push those in. Oh yeah, get those in the mix. Same thing on that garlic, maybe up in the front where it's not as hot. And we'll let that roast for, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes. So all of that charred exterior, I'm just going to slice that away to reveal that beautiful roasted beet gem on the inside.
That's so crazy. This is just like a crust ball. And then inside you've got this perfect jewel. Take a slice of that real quick.
Oh my God, taste this fire roasted beet.
That's fantastic. That is so good.
Now I'll take out my food processor, I'll add the beets. I'm gonna take just the leaves of some parsley, throw that in the mix, a handful of walnuts, drizzle in some tahini, a few scoops of Greek yogurt, slice off a wedge of lemon, squeeze that in for a little bit of brightness. I sprinkled in some whole cumin seeds, a little bit of salt, squeezed in about half of that roasted garlic bulb. You can blend this to your desired texture. I personally like this blended nice and smooth, like a creamy dip. All right, let's see what we got. Ooh, consistency. Spreadable to me. This is one of those dips where a lot of flavor just went in this processor, so you kind of never know what's on the other side until you taste it. That's heaven. Oh my God. So the beet is definitely still the star of that. The roasty sweetness in there is incredible. But then it's just balanced out with the earthiness of the walnut and the tang of the yogurt. Oh my God, and that's only gonna get better as it cools. I can guarantee that. So I've mentioned this many times before in meal prep videos. It's almost essential to have at least one acidic pickle-y type thing in your refrigerator at all times. Whether it's a simple pickled onion, a sauerkraut. When you're dealing with fatty food, we need to cut it with acid. And for this meal prep, it's no different. Well, actually a little different because we have some turnips, which is new in the pickle world for me. I also have some radish here, which I love pickling, but turnips are a traditional Middle Eastern pickle, so I figured I'd throw them into the mix. So I'm gonna do a quick pickle on these radishes and turnips. I'm using both some spring turnips and radish because they're both in season. So I actually don't have to peel these because they're spring turnips, so I'm just gonna give them a wash and a wipe down. But if you have winter turnips and it's got a tougher skin, make sure you give it a peel before you pickle them. So I'm gonna slice all of my veg into some thicker batons, which is the traditional style. And once everything is sliced up, I'll add it straight to my pickling jar. So you remember that reserved beet? Well, it's coming into play right now. I'm gonna give that a peel, chop that up into batons, and then add that to the jar as well, which is ultimately gonna give these pickles a beautiful pink traditional color. Now I've got some plain white vinegar. I'm gonna pour that about 1/3 to a halfway up the jar, depending on how acidic you like your pickles, and then pour over water to fill up the rest of the volume. And then I'll pour all of that liquid into a pot, which makes it super easy so you don't actually have to measure any liquid out. I'll add about 3 to 4 tablespoons of salt, and traditionally there is no sugar in this recipe, but the natural sweetness of all of your veg is gonna be enough to carry these pickles. So we're gonna bring it up to a boil so that salt dissolves, then pour the pickling liquid over your veg, which is gonna slightly cook your veg, but also help quickly infuse that brine. I'll leave the jar just slightly open to let some heat escape. And once they've cooled down, tighten up that jar, throw them in your fridge, and these are just gonna get better every single day they infuse in your refrigerator.
So I'm just in between recipes here, and I noticed the chickens have made their way over to the set. They're gonna get a little treat. We've got all of our scraps from the pickles. All right, back to cooking.
Of course, when it comes to meal prep, you need a protein, something that you can really base a meal around. But that protein, whatever it is, has to be functional. Got to be easy to say reheat. Maybe you can cook it beforehand or it's marinated. So in this case, we're not going to be, say, making kebabs from scratch. What I thought would be a great option to stick with the flavor profiles is some lamb patties. So to season up this ground lamb, I'm whipping out the mortar and pestle, which I like using to really get some texture in my spices. I'm gonna add some cumin seeds, some fennel seeds, some sesame seeds, a little bit of chili flake for some spice, a good bit of salt and some black pepper. And I'll just start grinding that up until I have a powdered spice mix with just a little bit of coarseness. I'll add all of that straight to the ground lamb, and then all this needs is some fresh herbage. I've got some parsley and mint, which you'll see in a few of these recipes, and I'll just take off the leaves, give them a rough chop, throw that into the mix, make sure everything is nice and incorporated, and form those into some mini patties. So before I get these lamb patties on the grill, I'm just gonna coat them in a little bit of olive oil. So these have been roasting over that charcoal for about 5 minutes. Of course, you can do them in the pan, and they're gonna be great as well. But let's start flipping and see where we're at. Oh yeah, that's near perfection. Slow charcoal roast. Now you can marinate a bunch of meat and cook it throughout the week as it marinates. But I find once you have these patties pre-cooked, they're gonna last for a few days and they're really easy to repurpose and reheat. So if you have the time on a Sunday, just do the cooking, get it done with. It's gonna make your life a little easier. So now that I've got those first two items prepped, I'm gonna start building out some meals. The first thing I made this week was a fun little toast with the beet dip. I had half a block of halloumi cheese, which is a classic Mediterranean frying cheese. I sliced that up into little cubes, and I took out one lamb patty and I sliced that up into the same size cube. I took out a frying pan, added a little bit of olive oil, and started frying up the lamb and cheese cubes. While that was frying up nice and crispy, I toasted up my bread and I thinly sliced some fresh cucumber. Now it took around 5 minutes to get those crispy edges on the cheese and lamb, but look at that flavor develop. To serve this up, I spread over that beet dip on the toast, added the crispy halloumi and lamb, and topped it with some fresh cucumbers, and talk about a fancy lunch. The next day for lunch, I actually used the same crispy halloumi and lamb that I had left over from the day before, and I built out a delicious salad. To a bowl, I added some sliced apples and cucumbers. Then I chopped up some little gem lettuce and added some spring mix to the top of that. Threw in the crispy halloumi and lamb and finished it off with some of our pickled veggies. And then for a quick dressing, I added a little bit of lemon juice, a squeeze of honey, and a drizzle of olive oil. Gave that a toss, and that's how you make a salad that you actually want to eat for lunch. So back to cooking, and we're continuing on with our Middle Eastern Mediterranean adventure. And as we prep out more of these items, well, we're unlocking more meals for the week. And to me, none of this food is really optimized without some solid bread. In this case, some pita or flatbread. And you can go to the market and buy a pack, but you know I like making bread. And when the grill is going, fresh pita, you can't beat it. So making a flatbread dough is really not intimidating at all. If you've made a pizza dough, it's pretty much the exact same thing. I'm gonna be weighing everything, so I'll get out my scale. To a mixing bowl, I'll add in my flour first. I'm going with 700 grams or about 5 cups, 2 teaspoons of instant yeast, 1 tablespoon of sugar, 2 tablespoons of salt, and pita bread is around the same exact hydration level as pizza dough. So to calculate the hydration that I need, I'm gonna take the 700 grams, which is my flour measurement, and then times that by 65% or 0.65 to get 450 grams of water, or about 1 3/4 cups of water. Now I'm gonna take a dough whisk and incorporate everything into a nice mass here, basically until you see no residual flour, and then I'll cover that with a damp towel and just let that rest for 5 minutes. Now that the dough is rested, I'll start the kneading process. Then we're gonna knead the dough for around 5 minutes until everything starts to get nice and smooth, and then just let that sit for another 10 minutes to rest the gluten, and then one final fold and your dough should be nice and smooth. I'm gonna take an airtight container and just grease it up with a little olive oil, throw that dough in and let that sit at room temperature until it doubles in size. And once your dough is fermented, I'm gonna split it up into 8 pieces, roll them into nice little balls, cover them with a damp towel and let them rest for 5 minutes. And then I'm gonna individually shape each of these pitas to get on the grill.
All right, one down. We've got the grill nice and hot. You could do this right in the pan, or you could throw it on, oh damn, I just made a hole in that. Come on, Mike. You could throw it on like a pizza steel in the oven. That works great for a nice puff. So they should take about a minute aside. They'll cook quick. Hopefully in 1 minute, I can crank out another pita and start the assembly line. All right, it looks like 1 minute is enough time to get the job done. We're over here and we're puffing rock. Oh, the golden brown you want on your pita. Another 45 seconds on that side and we'll have fresh pita. Before we go any further with this meal prep, we got to take a minute to enjoy some of this labor. I don't know if there's many things more enjoyable than a fresh, hot pita right off the grill. Just the fluffiness in there. Before we start adding a ton of flavor, which we will do, it's nice to just enjoy the pureness of this bread product right here. That's gonna beat your store-bought pita every single day of the week. Fluffy as a cloud, but so tender. Next up, we've got to make a yogurt sauce. It's almost a prereq for this type of meal prep, so I'm gonna go with a tzatziki. The first thing I'm gonna do for this yogurt sauce is grate up a cucumber with the box grater, and then I'll just add a little bit of salt and mix that in so I can start pulling out some of that water. Now I'm gonna take some mint and pick off the leaves from the stem and get a nice little fine chop going. And you can use fresh garlic, but since I had some of that extra roasted garlic, I'm just gonna squeeze that onto the cutting board and continue the chopping process. Now to bring this sauce together, I'm gonna put some Greek yogurt into a bowl, add in that fresh parsley and roasted garlic, and I'll squeeze the living hell out of those cucumbers, removing that liquid so we don't water down our sauce. Finally, a fresh squeeze of some lemon juice, a little bit of olive oil, some salt and pepper, and give it a mix. Oh, that looks great. So for another lunch this week, I made a crudité board. I chopped up some fresh cucumbers into a stick-like shape for dipping, and I did the same thing for some red and yellow bell pepper. And just to fill it out a little bit, I added some mini carrots that I had in the fridge. Then I took that pita we made and sliced it in half and gave it a toast just to wake it up a bit. And the 3 stars of the show, I've got the pickled veggies here, our roasted beet dip, and finally that yogurt tzatziki. Now for dinner, I wanted something a little more robust, so what I made was a really great lentil bowl. First, I chopped up some of those lamb patties and some fresh onion. I added that to a pot with some oil to get those nice and crispy. In the meantime, I peeled and chopped up some carrots, threw those in the oven with a little bit of olive oil, honey, and salt, and roasted those for 15 minutes at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Once the lamb and onion was nice and crispy, I added some sliced garlic and fried that up for another 2 minutes. Then I added in 1 cup of lentils, a can of crushed tomatoes, a little bit of white wine, topped it off with some water and just a little bit of salt for flavor. And I covered that up and cooked that on a low heat for around 15 minutes. To plate up this bowl, I added on those crispy lamb lentils, the roasted carrots, some of that beet dip, a little scoop of tzatziki, and those pickled veggies. So most people view hummus as like a little snacky. You dip some carrots, some cucumber in, boom, you're good to go. But in reality, hummus can be converted into a full-on meal, which makes it really versatile for a lot of different meal prep applications. So we're gonna make some hummus completely from scratch. Okay, so this isn't exactly the traditional way to make hummus, because what we're gonna do is pressure cook our chickpeas, which is great because we don't even have to soak them overnight. Soaking the chickpeas actually does dilute the flavor just a little bit. So we're gonna get an even more intense chickpea flavored hummus. I'm adding 2 cups of chickpeas to the pressure cooker and covering those in water. And I'll set the pressure cooker for 45 minutes on high. After 45 minutes, you can release the steam and you can see I've got perfectly cooked and tender chickpeas, which I'm actually gonna reserve just about a cup of for the next recipe. And then I'll pour the rest of the chickpeas into a blender along with a ton of tahini. If you want traditional tasting hummus, do not skimp on the tahini. A squeeze of about half a lemon, a tablespoon of salt, and 2 cloves of fresh garlic. And then just let that blend for a few minutes and check in on the consistency. If you need a little bit more of that aquafaba or chickpea water, just pour it in. I'm gonna add a little bit more water
I've run out of aquafaba. It's always very deceiving how much a warm hummus will solidify when it cools down. So make sure it's a little more liquidy if it's warm. So we've prepped a lot of incredible food so far, and I think the only thing missing at this point is some fresh element. But remember, when we're meal prepping, it's gotta be hearty. It needs to be able to hold up for multiple days. And I have the perfect little Mediterranean salad. Plus, it pretty much uses up a lot of leftovers from everything we've cooked. The first thing going in this salad to really bulk it up are those perfectly cooked chickpeas. I also have some cucumber left over from the yogurt sauce, so I'll dice that up into small cubes. I'll dice up some red onion, then I'll chop up some parsley. And I've got some cherry tomatoes here, but use whatever type of tomato you have. Chop those up into little pieces, squeeze in a little lemon juice, hit it with some olive oil, and mix. Now I know meal prepping at times can be a bit tedious, especially with all of that chopping, but getting through all of these meals today was so much easier thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Mizzen, and their 7-inch chef knife, which is a super high quality knife made of premium stainless steel, all for around 2 to 3 times less expensive than other premium knife brands. And not only does Mizzen offer great knives that I use for all my cooking needs, but I love their line of products to help maintain those knives. Their whetstones are definitely my go-to for keeping my friend nice and sharp here, and if you don't have a ton of counter space for a knife block or a magnetic strip, they offer a great drawer organizer and 2 different wood colors that helps keep those knives sharp and protected. So if you're interested in purchasing any Mizzen products, just click the link below in the description, use code word HOMECOOKS for 20% off your first order. Now before we get back into a little meal prep, let me just give you a little peek into the kitchen renovation. Hence the mess in the house. Floors are completely refinished and done. A nice red oak. So everything is pretty much in place and ready for the custom cabinets or shelving that's gonna go in here. Plus a nice big custom island that my dad is currently building. We are just a few weeks away from getting back in this kitchen and just crushing content, and I cannot tell you how excited I am. So stay tuned for updates. And now we can finish off this meal prep. Now obviously hummus makes a great snack. Take that, dip it. But hummus really can be the star of a meal. So what I'm gonna do is make 2 hummus bowls for dinner. So at first I chopped up some cauliflower, got that in a bowl with some olive oil and salt, and threw that in the air fryer at 370 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 minutes. In the meantime, I chopped up some lamb patties, threw that in a pan with some oil, and added in some red bell pepper and fried that up until it was nice and crispy. Once the cauliflower was roasted, I spread on the hummus on the bottom of a flat plate, added the roasted cauliflower to one, and for the second one, I topped that with the crispy lamb and bell peppers, and then covered that in our prep pickled veggie mixture. And then finally, I wrapped those pitas in a damp towel and threw those in the microwave to give them a little more fluffiness, and chopped those into some dipping size pieces. And this was such an incredibly satisfying meal with a ton of variety and just something a little more unique for a weekday dinner. So at this point of the week, I was a bit over the lamb, so I decided to introduce a new protein into the mix. So I fried up a super crispy piece of salmon, and once that was done, I added in some mushrooms to the pan, fried those up for about 2 minutes, and then chopped in some fresh greens with a little bit of salt, and just cooked that down until everything was nice and wilted. To build out a sauce, I added a little bit of lemon juice and some white wine and reduced that for about 2 minutes. I was packing this lunch to go, so I took out a few containers, added a bed of arugula, spooned in our prep salad, cut the salmon up into some big chunks, and once our veggies and sauce were completely cooled, I dumped that over the salad, and this made a really great, hearty, and delicious lunch. So hopefully you're inspired to try out some new flavors with your weekly meal prep, and leave a comment below with any other cuisines you'd like to see for this series. And if you want more meal prep, just click right here.